Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session of 7:30 p.m., 10th of October, Fiji time. Session 2 of History, Legacy, Indenture, and Construction of Identities. We have a list of speakers from all around the world. We are so happy to see you, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We will just go by some order here. I have a list. So we will start with Jayakumar and Lijo Lal's presentation. A research scholar, Department of Sociology, University of Kerala. And the title is Formation of Ethnic Identities, Malayali Diaspora in Canada. So please proceed. You have around 20 minutes to do your presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon all. My name is Lijo Lal. I'm a research scholar in Department of Sociology, University of Kerala. My presentation is titled as Formation of Ethnic Identity of Malayali Diaspora in Canada. It is about Malayali people who migrated to Canada and how they maintain their identity in that transnational space. Introduction. Before going to that, we need to know about Malayali. Many of may know that about Kerala state, which is situated in southern part of India. Southern India, and Malayali, people of Indian origin from the state of Kerala who speak Malayalam. Their mother tongue is Malayalam. They are known as Keralites, Malayalis, and Mallus. They hail from Hindu, Muslim, and Christian religions. Malayali diaspora consists of migrant, non-resident Keralites, and transnational students. Methodology. The methodology used in this presentation is ethnographic content analysis, which analyzed various contents available in social media. The researcher used a passive observation for this and analyzed various social media posts, images, videos, YouTube blogs, etc. Before going to that, there need to be an introduction for migration from Kerala. As a state which is situated in southern part of India, we have a long history of migration. During the ancient period, due to our trade relations with various Western and Roman Empire, etc., we have a long history in the past. And during the colonial rule, our migration is mainly as domestic laborers in plantation sectors, etc. during the British colonial rule, that is before 1947. And the third stage is considered as during the 1960s, that is migration of professionals to Western countries. And one of the major massive migration started during 1970 due to oil boom in Gulf countries. And at present, we have migration to all developing and developing countries, and it is encouraged by our society very much. Malayali diaspora in Canada. Early migration started from Kerala to Canada is during 1960s. As I mentioned earlier, the migration started during 1960s as the professionals such as office clerks, nurses, doctors, etc. They are encouraged to migrate in developing and developed countries. So that migration started to Canada during 1960s. And it was increasing year by year. By 2010, it is estimated that it have a huge impact because many of our international students migrated to Canada and they settled there. And according to the census of Canada, 2016 data, about 33,305 Malayalis in Canada are citizens. but it is estimated that there is a 500,000 Malayalis in Canada as their citizens, professionals, and international students. Ethnic identity. The Malayali ethnic identity is based on three major aspects. First one is the homeland, that is Kerala state, and second one is their mother tongue, Malayalam, and their socio-cultural characteristics. With the intention to maintain ethnic identity and preserve their culture, Malayalis in Canada formed many of their ethnic associations in Canada. Through their activities based on their ethnic association, they retain their collective memory and sharing their identity there. Ethnic organization. There are various types of ethnic organizations such as secular, socio-cultural, religious, caste-based, and community-based associations in Canada. In Canada, some of the ethnic organization includes Canadian Malayali Association, CMA, Toronto Malayali Samajam, TMS, Ontario Regional Malayali Association, ORMA, and Nair Social Society of Canada, etc. are some of the organizations. Networking. These organizations provide opportunities to network with others in Canada, that is other Malayalis in Canada. They create a social capital, which is essential for the adaptation and adjustment of new migrants. Organizations such as professional and caste, socio-cultural basis, religious basis provide vital support for them when they reach Canada. This is a picture of CMA picnic, which was done in July 22 in 2019, which shows that how they able to network in Canada. Malayalis, majority in this picture engaged in various activities. Through their activities, they retain their collective memory. Collective effort. Ethnic identity is not an individual aspect. Identity is one of the critical factors that play a crucial role in every individual life. The social environment shapes the individual identity he was born and brought up. The social environment changes through migration and which led to anomaly in the life of migrants. To avoid this, they maintain a social identity. Malayalis in Canada organize various cultural festivals and social events. They celebrate all special days like in our society, such as Republic Day, Independence Day, and all other important aspects and special days. This is a picture of the plot which was during the celebration of Republic Day, which shows the real Malayali culture, the boat, the dressing, the arrangement which they have shows the Malayali identity, and which win the second prize for the best plot award in that time. Socio-cultural activities. These ethnic groups, ethnic associations encourage socio-cultural activities in Canada. Major activities include to encourage Malayalam language. They adopt names of their association which reflect its culture. Malayalam literary competition was organized by them, and they also provide opportunities to learn Malayalam in Canada. There are various art forms which was organized by them. They provide opportunity to learn from there. That include Kadakali, Kalaripayattu, and Mohini Attam. This is a picture that is a part of Onam celebration, which was organized by Toronto Malayali Samajam. Socio-cultural activities. We Malayalis tend to celebrate all the special days. In Canada also, they celebrate various festivals such as Onam. Onam is our national festival. Irrespective of any other difference based on caste, class, religion. We all celebrate Onam. The major attractions of Onam includes Pookalam, Mahabali, Chendamelam, traditional dressing, and most importantly, Ona Sadhya. Ona Sadhya is the traditional full square feast in community, which bring unity within the group. Beside this, the ethnic organization in Canada also organized events such as Keralotsavam, CMA Cult Fest, it's a cultural fest, picnic of Malayali families, etc. This is a brochure of CMA Onam festival celebration, and the center part, it is known as Kadakali Dance, and in left side, there is a decoration with the flower. It is known as Atta Pookalam or Pookalam, which I mentioned earlier. And the various cult fest they organized in Canada, which encourage the youngsters, especially the children, to encourage them to engage with their activities so that they can socialize as a Malayali. Traditional dress style. The traditional Kerala dress, such as mundu or kasavu for women, it's like sari, and mundu for men, which reflect Malayali identity. Malayalis get the opportunity to wear the traditional dresses only in the group events of Malayali ethnic organization. Thus, the socio-cultural events and festival provide opportunity to reflect their identity. Just look at the picture. This is the best example how they reflect their identity in transnational space. This is the actual reflection of our dressing style, our traditional dressing style. They get opportunities only during these events organized by ethnic associations. Spiritual support. Various religious associations provide support in the form of organizing bhajanas and prayers, especially during this Shabarimala season. Shabarimala is one of the world-renowned pilgrim center in Kerala. They created a model of Shabarimala there, and they organized bhajanas and special prayers during that season. And it helped to individual and integrate into the mainstream community. But these organization or association, which is based on caste and community, still preserve the caste and community sentiments. Socialization. One of the major effect of these ethnic organization and ethnic activities is the socialization of children. They are exposed to learning the traditional values, customs from the group events. Malayali organization facilitate learning Malayalam in Canada. As I mentioned earlier, the social events and festival give due importance to our tradition, values, and which reflect the identity of Malayali. It also helps to transmit Malayali culture from one generation to another. This is how the youngsters, younger generation participating in the games and festivals. Conclusion, Malayali ethnic organizations help to maintain their identity in Canada. Every individual needs identification with their community. Members tend to develop an attachment and sentiment of identification with their community and organization. This will rise to a we feeling. The youngsters in Canada experience traditional food, dance, and music, think about their cultural background, and develop a sense of oneness, which help them to retain their collective memory. Role playing. Malayali organization give the opportunity to play different roles that integrate the community as a whole. This organization helps socialize values of Malayali community. It is evident from the increasing participation of children in socio-cultural events. They prepare the youngsters to take the roles played by them now. Dependence. The majority of Malayalis depend on their community and community organization in host region. This helps them to integrate in a better manner in the transnational space. Through these activities and engagement, ethnic association play a key role in maintaining and forming and maintaining the Malayali identity in Canada. Through the collective activities, they regain their collective memory in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Lijo, for your excellent presentation. And now we will proceed to Naren and Satchidanand's presentation. Yeah, you can see me, right? Naren, are you there?
I'm yeah, great.
So, yeah, please go ahead with your presentation. You said second, so I'm putting you second.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sunil. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Bonjour tout le monde. Once again, I would like to thank the organizers for accepting our paper on looking at what has happened to the indentured laborers, or what the French call les engagés, where they are, what has happened to them. So today I will be talking about the Reunion Island, and with my co-author, Satchidanand Seethanen from the University of Reunion. Maybe he wants to say hello, Sir Sachi.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. You're welcome.
Right. Okay. So as I said before we start, I just wanted to mention a few points about why we wanted to look into what has happened to the descendants of the indentured laborers in the Reunion Island. First is that there is very little research in the Anglo-Saxon literature about the Reunion Island and what has happened, or the history even of the indentured laborers. So we want to fill in that gap, where we want to bring the stories, the histories, the trajectories of the descendants of the Reunion, and the descendants of the indentured laborers from the Reunion Island. So that's number one thing that we want to mention. The second thing we want to mention is that it's extremely difficult to get disaggregated data according to ethnic lines in the Reunion Island, but also in general in France. So it has been a very difficult exercise for us to walk through this fine line and bring out what we wanted to talk about, the descendants of les engagés, as the French call. So with these points, let me introduce myself. So I'm Naren Prasad, and my co-author is Satchidanand Seethanen. I'm from Fiji, and originally from Fiji, but I have family connections in the Reunion Island. So I wanted to bring out some of the similarities and, our common heritage, common history between all other countries where the indentured laborers went, like the Caribbean islands, in Trinidad, in Guyana, in Fiji, in Mauritius. So there is not much, as I was saying, there's not much studies done on the Reunion Island. For whatever reasons, we can talk about the political dimension of why there's not so much research on the descendants of the indentured laborers. So with this, if you'll allow me, Chair, I will share my screen with you so that you are able to better follow what Sachi, my co-author, and we intend to do. But first, just want to mention that many people, as I mentioned, are not aware of even where the Reunion Island is. So Sachi had a brilliant idea of showing first in this international conference where the Reunion Island is. It is in the Indian Ocean, beside Mauritius Island, which is on the right, and Madagascar on the left. It's a small country, belongs to France. It's a French territory with a population of about 860,000, similar to the population of Fiji, for example, where I come from. And about 30% of the population of Reunion Island are the descendants of the indentured laborers. And it's exactly the same amount of, in terms of the proportion of people who are descendants of the indentured laborers in Fiji, about 34% in Fiji, 30% in the Reunion Island. So you can see this quite a lot of similarities, right? But also in terms of the area of Reunion Island, it's rather small. Now I want to mention something important is the number of migrants who had come to Reunion Island from India. This graph has been combined from different sources we looked into, and then we looked from 1828 to 1883, the number of indentured laborers who had come to the Reunion Island. Remember that the Reunion Island belonged to France and still belongs to France. So the French were working with the British in order to bring the Indians to work on the sugarcane plantation. As you all know very well, that the indentured laborers that were taken to the colonies were basically to work on the sugarcane plantations after the end of the slavery. The British stopped the slavery in 1833 or 1834. The French stopped it in 1848. And that's when you can see in this graph here, the number of indentured laborers who came each year to the Reunion Island. And the line graph shows the cumulative amount, like at any given point, how many indentured laborers were there. You can see it has increased dramatically from 1928. In fact, the real progression started from 1848, when there was this Franco-English convention in order to bring the indentured laborers to the Reunion Island. So what we have estimated is more or less about 90,000 or so people were brought in, but then a third of them had returned to India. So in a sum, based on all the archive and research that we have done, looking into various sources, we find that about 60 to 61,000 indentured laborers were brought to the Reunion Island. It's similar amount in Fiji, for example. It was like 61,000 indentured laborers were brought to Fiji, but at a very different period from 1879 to 1920, then when the slavery, the indentured labor system ended. So you can see those the trend of the migrants who came from India. Most of the indentured laborers came from the southern part of India. Sachi had this great idea of putting this map just to show where, in fact, the descendants, where the migrants or the indentured laborers came from, basically from southern India, Pondicherry, which belonged to France, and some of the regions like Karikal and other regions. You can see that's the bulk of the people from the Indian continent that came to the Reunion Island. What we wanted to show here is a few things. One is what has happened to them in terms of their identity and integration. Most of the people would agree that the French way of colonizing a country was totally different than that of the British, where when France colonized a country, they really integrated it and assimilated the population into their own culture or traditions. So the first thing that the French authorities with the churches did was to Christianize the migrant workers who had come to the Reunion Island. It was at times they had banned the religious activities of the Indians. They were not allowed to practice their religion or even talk the language, not allowed to build temples, but somehow they were able to persist and continue practicing their religion even in clandestine way. So now if we go to the Reunion Island, the people have a dual culture where they do practice the Hinduism, but with a Christian background. So there's a dual religious practices. But also we have seen recently there has been, as I mentioned, persistence of Hindu rituals have been going on. There's lots of festivals which are taking place. I have just mentioned, our previous speaker was talking about some of the festivals, and then in Reunion, Pongal is one of the festivals that continues even now, and it was practiced during the indentured systems, where the festival was about the end of the harvesting seasons. And even now, the reunions are very much attached to Diwali or Deepawali. So there has been a lot of practice of Hindu practices going on. In fact, although, as I said, it was done in a clandestine way, but it has persisted, and there has been a revival since the 1980s and 90s, where the descendants of the indentured laborers are going back to the sources and rediscovering their identity. The other thing, how the French tried to assimilate the indentured laborers was to change their names. Most of the names, if you'll find go to Reunion, you'll find very Christian names of the descendants of the indentured laborers. But since the 1980s and 90s, there has, as I mentioned, there's a return or looking back to the sources, and where the names, the Indian names or Hindu names, are coming back. I gave you a few examples in our paper, where, for example, Meenakshi, an Indian name, has been changed into Meenachi. We were talking about this in yesterday's panel about the change in name and how our names have been changed from the Hindu origin to something different, and which in fact has created its own meanings. One thing which is quite sad is that the language of these migrants has been lost. The descendants, most of them do not speak the language of their ancestors. Basically, it was Tamil language. They have lost that. Although there has been some schools being opened to teach some of the aspects of the language, but that has been surprisingly lost because of the colonial policies. As opposed to what has happened in Fiji, for example, where the descendants of the indentured laborers are able to practice their Hindi language, Bhojpuri, as we were listening yesterday in Mauritius Islands. So you can see that one of the specific things is that the loss of language in the Reunion Island. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, since the 1980s, there has been a revival to rediscover the Indianness of the indentured laborers. And there has been some interest in the language with some, dance, classical dance and others that the people are taking interest in Hinduism. People are going back to India, traveling, and even the dress code has been changing. As I was mentioning, the names are being changed now, given Hindu names, and festivals like Diwali are becoming very popular. So you can see there has been a revival and going back to the sources of their Indian identity. What I want to mention is the title of this paper is what has happened to the descendants of the Les Engagés, is that of course some of the identity has died, but they have created their own breed of identity and Indianness. We have also seen that although they were persecuted on the plantations during the colonial period, most of the descendants, or most of the indentured laborers, when they had the opportunities or they took the opportunities and were able to succeed in either creating, so political connections or having business alliances, buying land. And I've given some of the names, for example, of landowners or sugar producers, industrialists, transport in the transport sector, and traders. I myself have some family members who are part of these successful businesses, and these are the descendants of our indentured laborers. And one of them is Augusta Katapune. He was quite successful. His grandparents had migrated from India, and he bought land and then transport companies. So they have been very successful. But all the others, like Panade, Muruvan, I mean, they have been very successful. Ramasamy even also, the family have been quite successful. Most of them in the Reunion Islands are quite highly educated. I'm talking about the descendants of the indentured laborers. They are, some of them have very good positions, both in the civil service or politically well connected. Some of them, have been politicians and trade unions. In fact, I was mentioning that the trade union movement started by the descendants or the indentured laborers in the plantation. And I've given some names like Birapan and the others who were basically the trade unionists to start in the Reunion Island. Like with this very sketchy summary of our paper, in terms of providing the conclusion, as we have said, we have tried to put the indentured laborers' migration to Reunion Island in the context, the historical context, but also we have mentioned that there has been a loss of Indian language, but there is a, coming back towards looking and finding out their Indianness in the Reunion Island. But in doing so, they have created their own culture, own Indian identity. And as I was mentioning, is that there has been a return to the source, going back to the motherland India, connecting with India, but it's still challenges there. But with this overview, I think I'm done with my slides. I don't know if Sachi has anything to add. I'd be very happy to take your question at the end. But Sachi, would you like to add anything that I have missed?
Oh, it's okay. So it was very perfect. So you mentioned all the points we discussed previously.
So thank you very much for your attention. Sunil, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naren, for your excellent presentation. I'm sure there would be questions for you at the end. Often, many issues arise from what you have to say, when in fact the idea is to clarify and give a picture. It often leads to many more questions. So, be ready for that at the end. Our next presenter would be Girjanand Singh. Arvind, are you there? I'm not sure. I have the name on the list, but never mind. So if not, then we will go for the next one on the list, which is Jayshree. Jayshree, yes. Are you?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Yeah, okay. You can go ahead with your presentation. You have your title, The Scope of Archaeology in the Study of Indenture. So yes. Please briefly introduce yourself, and you have 20 minutes or so to present your paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. I'm Jayshree Mungur-Medhi from Mauritius. I'm an archaeologist, and my paper today will be based on what I do. And I'll share my presentation. So I'll be talking today about the scope of archaeology to study indenture, because what we found is like we talk a lot of indenture. We do much historical studies have been done looking at the archives and all, but looking at sites itself is hardly done. I think many of you will think like, okay, it's just a historical period which is very close to us, so we have lots of written records, and also why we have to do archaeology, and archaeology is, as you know, is much more expensive doing archaeology rather than doing just historical studies. But what we found is, like, with our experience of doing archaeology, with archaeology of slavery, archaeology of indenture, we found that many of what we get in archaeological data is not always reflected in the records, is not always reflected in oral history, is not always reflected in whatever people has been reported as written materials. So when we do the archaeology, we really have hands on the remains of those people themselves, their everyday life, which is not found in the written records, the culture, the beliefs, the traditions of the people, which is not found in written sources, and also often changed or modified through oral traditions and history, oral history. So through the archaeological studies, we can have hands of the material themselves, the material of those people, of those everyday, of the everyday life of those people, and at the same time understanding the system itself. And in this field, not much has been done. I think Mauritius is the only country where archaeology of indenture is being practiced, which is, no, I mean, everybody knows the World Heritage Site, Apravasigat World Heritage Property, which has been, the nomination dossier has been prepared. This has been studied based on archaeological, lots of historical studies, lots of archival studies, but a lot of archaeology. The site has been, from what we know about the site in the 1990s, which was like that, those who visited Mauritius and had a chance to see the site of Apravasigat, if you visit the site now, you don't see any of these things, because this was added in the 1990s. So before 2000, before the year 2001, this is what you will see in the site: tiles in the rooms, you will see a fountain and all, because it was, the site was converted into a promenade, a site of memory, yes, but quite modified. So when we did the archaeological studies, this is what has been revealed. So what you see on the site now, all those chambers, all these walls, the stairs, which were all buried actually. So Apravasigat is actually the first site where this archaeology has been practiced. And from there, this whole concept, we can say, because from there we started working on all the different sites related. And from there, I can say that the whole concept of this archaeology of indenture has been developed. Like this, we have lots of sites in Mauritius. We have the Flat Island, the quarantine station, which is a site being studied also. These are the remains in Flat Island. Can you hear? Is it okay? Can you hear?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Jayshree, everything is fine. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. So this is the Flat Island. These are the remains of Flat Island we found there, and this site also is being archaeologically studied. This is another site, Patukananye, and we found some of the remains that has been listed in which has been planned in the archives. This is another site, Piano Sugar Camp, and these are the archaeological dig done there. This is one of the indenture camp where the workers were living when they were working in the sugarcane fields. This is another site, Beghan Depot. Those who visited in Mauritius, I'm sure they have been to these sites. And all these sites, they are, I mean, like that, you have many sites in Mauritius. And the scope of such study is not limited to Mauritius, because it's a flow of more than 2.2 million people. And I feel like now with the new studies, I think the figures are increasing. The historians, my colleague historians can add on that, but these people landed in more than 26 countries around the world. There is the whole diaspora of the indentured population, and they had a systematic settlement pattern in all these countries where they landed. It has been an international phenomenon which shaped the lives of millions of people around the world. It impacted their immigration, their living in those places impacted on the landscape, on the country, on the culture themselves, but also on the culture of the people where they landed, in like all these contacts that they had. And all this can be traced through archaeology. Archaeology of indenture can be developed as a global discipline. This is what I'm arguing since a few years, that it can be developed as a global discipline which can add up in our understanding of the history of the indentured people, as well as the system that dominated the world in the 19th century and beyond. And like this, you have sites all around these countries, like you have Nelson Island in Trinidad, in Trinidad, you also have the coconut plantation camps and more. You have a landing place in Jamaica. You have quarantine station in Australia. You have I know you have the colleagues from Réunion, they can tell you. I know even in Réunion you have remains of sites where indenture have been, where they have worked, where they have lived. So all these sites we can study them as an archaeological site. And it's not to say that we stick to archaeology and not the others, but it's a kind of multidisciplinary approach that we have to look into, because they complement each other. Like you have historical studies, oral history, anthropology, and archaeology together can help to better understand indenture. And as we have the emotions, we do the archaeology of slavery also. And as the archaeology of slavery, I think archaeology of indenture is an important discipline that can be developed over the world. And much can be known and understood for indenture and their lives, the system itself, through archaeology. And I think the legacy and heritage of indenture can be better preserved and respected through the scientific studies, through study of archaeology. And this is how we can value those heritage sites. I know we are very, when we talk of indenture and the success and the progress and where they lived and all, we are very emotional, lots of memory attached and all. But I think we also need scientific studies to add up to that, because just attaching to memory and emotions will not really give the legacy, the value to the legacy, the value of the heritage of indenture. And I think that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayshree. Your presentation was short but very interesting. I'm sure you will be there to answer the questions that may arise. Huh?
Yes.
Yes. So we will move on to the next presentation. Jimmy Harmon, are you there? I thought so.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. So your presentation is on unimagined, that's the title, Unimagined Identities in Mauritius.
Yes.
So please go ahead, and you are from Intercontinental Slavery Museum in Mauritius. Please go ahead with your presentation. You have around 20 minutes to present. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So I'm going to talk about a novel. The title, it's a French novel written in French called À l'autre bout de moi. And I locate this novel into the topic which I have entitled Unimagined Identities in Mauritius. So before I go to I give you the content of the novel itself. Let me briefly give you some main features of Mauritius. So Mauritius, as you can see on the slide, 1.2 million inhabitants. So it is composed, we got independence in 1968, 1.2 million people. So the major ethnic groups are Indo-Mauritians, so mainly people coming from of Indian origins. So we are talking about indentured labor. This is in that group that you have descendants of indentured laborers. Then you have what you call the Creoles. The Creoles, their history is mainly shaped by slavery. So in that group, you have people of African origins, of mixed origins. I'm in that category, so of mixed origins. So it's a mixture of, it can be indenture, it can be Chinese, it can be Europeans. So these are what we call here in Mauritius the Creoles. Then you have the Chinese, the Muslims, and the whites, Franco-Mauritians. So the novel itself, to get a better understanding of the main themes of that novel, we have to have a look at the contemporary issues in Mauritius. So I'm giving you in the next slide, it's a selected, okay? It just gave a partial view of the situation in Mauritius, but it does give us some insights into contemporary issues. So the contemporary issues in Mauritius, I would say over some 20 years now, we have what we call contested heritage. My colleague Jayshree of Apravasigat was presenting something on archaeology. So during the past 20 years, academics, researchers, people involved at grassroots level, in my category, I would define myself as an engaged researcher. So being at the same time academic and working at grassroots level. So there have been claims of rewriting our history from below. There was another big issue, and we are still in that because we are a young nation. So it's about nation building. And when we talk about nation building in Mauritius, there is always that question of majority and minority. So how do the majority and the minorities work together for a better Mauritius? Then in around 2000, 2011, we just got in 2009, what we call here a Truth and Justice Commission. That commission investigated the legacy of slavery and indentured labor. So from that commission came forcefully the issue of Creole minority rights, about underrepresentation, access to resources, discrimination. Then there is an ongoing debate since independence, because the electoral system that we have in Mauritius comes from the British. And at that time, the British made provision in our constitution for what we call the best loser system. What is it about? Is during foreign elections, if you run for the elections, you will have winners and losers, but you will have also among the losers what we would call the best losers. The best losers, in fact, you identify those who have got the highest scores, but on ethnic, for an ethnic balance, for an ethnic representation in the National Assembly. This is a very big debate because there are people who want to keep that system just to ensure ethnic representation. And at the same time, the young generation is saying, if we want to be Mauritians, we have to get rid of that system of best loser system. And quite recently, maybe some 3 years, 5 years now, the issue of ecology, of climate change is coming into the picture. So here are the contemporary issues in Mauritius. So this is the background. Now I come to my main subject. It's the novel called À l'autre bout de moi. So it's a novel which was published in 1979. In fact, it's a Mauritian, it's a woman called Marie-Thérèse Humbert. She's well known in the Francophone literature. She went to France. She got established there, I think in the 1960s, something like that. And she has been publishing since then many novels. So this novel is her first novel. It was published in 1979, 262 pages. And she has been publishing, as I told you, other novels in French. The last one, the latest one, is called, as you can see on the slide, it's called Maison et Royaume. So the novel À l'autre bout de moi, if we have to translate the title, it would be At the Other End of Myself, or Myself from the Inside Out. This could be a tentative translation of a title. It just gives you an idea. What is it about? It's about the self. It's about the deep reflection from inside outside. So this novel is a fictional work. It is a fictional work that portrays real life social realities, political situation of a pre-independence period in Mauritius, through the portrait of a middle-class family in the 1950s. And when you read that novel, when you read the story of that family, you have as background the whole issue at that time when Mauritians had to choose between voting for or against independence. And the vote for or against independence, you had at that time, the whole debate, if you voted for independence, those who were against vote or who were hesitant to vote for independence, there was a fear of a Hindu peril for the minorities. That is, there was the fear that the Indians would take over the country and it would be a country where minorities will have no place. So this was a big fear at that time especially in the Creole groups. So in that novel, when you read the story of that family, you get a glimpse of the political and social situation of that time. So let me give you now the plot. And for the plot itself, I have asked my brother, Stanley Harmon, who is an artist, just to illustrate the story itself. So it is the story of a Morin family. That family is called Morin. And it is what we call here in Mauritius in those days. That term is no longer used now, gens de couleur, colored people. So this term, the colored population, you have it especially in the US among the African Americans. And here in Mauritius, we use that term, gens de couleur, in Réunion Island also, in the Martinique, in the French dependencies. This term, gens de couleur, has been used. It is an intermediary group, mixed group between whites and blacks, or other mix, but it is especially characterized by its class position. Okay, so we can say it is the upper middle class or lower middle class coming from slavery and indentured labor. So it is the story, in fact, a tragic story of the twin sisters, Anne and Nadej. So the two main characters in that novel is Anne and Nadej. Both are adolescents. So they grow up in a region in Mauritius called Quatre-Bornes. It's a middle class region where in those days, people of the gens de couleur went to live there. And then all the vicinity, all the neighborhood, all at the background, you have the Indians and the Black Creoles, working class. So that family, the family of Anne and Nadej, it looks like it has a good looking. The sisters attend a good Catholic school. The father works as clerk at a notary office. But however, that family has also its own internal problems. The father gets very often back home drunk after work. And one day the mother gets fed up with her husband, takes her children and leaves for a couple of days very far away from his husband. And then she gets back home after a couple of weeks. Then after some weeks or some months, the mother dies. And then will come the most difficult part of these two sisters. So when the mother dies, the twin sisters are left on their own. They are adolescents. And like all adolescents, they discover love. So Nadège and Anne start getting attracted by young men in the locality. And what is very funny is that the place where they meet, they date, is in the Chinese local shop. So it's there that they meet young men and so. So Nadège and Anne grow up with racial prejudice. I give a quote here. I give it in both French and English. I hope you can see it. So the mother, in one part of that novel, the mother is warning her two sisters, please get properly attired, behave well, otherwise you would look like the Indian girls, little Indian girls. This is said on a tone of very downgrading towards the Indians. So good-mannered, if you want to be good-mannered, if you want to grow up well, it's not the model of Indians. So you can see right in the adolescence, in the childhood, we grow up with this racial prejudice. But then comes when these two sisters grow up. So Anne is more or less following the principles of the mother. What she does, she looks for a white young man. She dates with a white young man. But the thing is that the white young man is more or less taking some good time with Anne. He's not really, we can see he does not want to get a long-term relationship with that girl. But Nadège, on her part, falls in love, really romantic love, with an Indo-Mauritian who in the novel is a politician and who is going to run for the general elections, and he's in the independence party. So there is love, there is passion. And the thing is that that young man is an adult, but Nadège is an adolescent. So these things becomes complicated, and Nadège falls pregnant. She gets backstreet abortion, and during abortion, she dies. This becomes a big scandal. It becomes a police case, and Nadège dies. At that point, Anne gets remorse for her sister. She is pricked by the pangs of remorse. The death of her sister makes her realize that she has been grown up with racial prejudice by her mother. And so she wants to reconcile with the past. But the thing is that her sister is no longer there. So what is done cannot be undone. And in order to redeem herself, this is the tragic part, or it could be also the beautiful part of it. She leaves the white guy and she goes to live with the Indo-Mauritian politician with whom her sister was in love. So this story of À l'autre bout de moi, at the end of that story, more or less at the end, I put it there the two excerpts, one in French as usual and in English. Anne says, I hope that one day my children will be able to contemplate Archangel Gabriel, so Catholic deity, and Vishnu, Hindu deity. This is very highly symbolical, very strong. At the end of the novel, it gives an idea about the desire for unity, for both, that is, love transcends all the social identities and conflicts. So I would say, and it isn't, to conclude, I conclude with three observations. First, I give you an extract of the Truth and Justice Commission. So as you can see on the slide here, the Truth and Justice Commission says that the history of slavery, indenture, and colonialism has been significant in the classification of individuals in Mauritius, creating enduring categories of oppressors and victims, whose connotations have endured in contemporary society. So we Mauritians today, descendants of slavery, descendants of indentured labor, we struggle, we come to grips with that. Okay, with this situation, be it at work, be it in your own family, be it in the larger society. So we come to grips with that because even we do genealogy and all of that. Even there have been people doing genealogy. They have been very much surprised to find they consider themselves as slave descents, but they find that in their they have one lineage coming from whites also. So things are. This is the complex situation in Mauritius. Hence, I use 3 concepts. I think these 3 concepts can help us to understand the situation. The first concept is anamnesis. Anamnesis means journey back. And utopia is a Greek word which means unreal world. And utopia means the perfect world. So when we analyze Anne, after the death of her sister, Nadej, she wants to make a journey back, reflect on her identity, how she has been grown up. And at the same time, in that context, we see the unreal world, as if that debate, that question which is going on is not in a real world. Because when you come to grips with that in your work, in day-to-day life, we can see it's a perfect world, that unity, that nation building we want. Okay. So at the end of my, if you want, my reflection would, I myself have been working a lot on that as a researcher, engaged with it at grassroots level. I was just thinking of Claude Lévi-Strauss, the French philosopher, anthropologist, who says that identity, I hope you can see it here, identity is a sort of virtual home, which we find indispensable as a point of reference when explaining a certain number of things. That is identity. Yes, we all need to have an identity. We all refer to our identity. And identity can be as well, it can be ascribed. People assign an identity to you and you react, or you construct your own identity. This is the social dimension of identity. This is a political dimension of identity. But when you are with yourself, you just put the question, does identity or self really exist? And here I come to the Buddhist philosophy of Atta, where for the Buddhist, the self does not exist. It is a non-self. So here it is, that novel, the issues of identity, the issue of legacy of slavery and indenture in Mauritius. Thank you very much for your attention. That's okay?
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. You have done a great job, reflected through the novel, the dynamics of identity in Mauritius. I'm sure there would be many, many questions for you. I would have some questions for you, for sure.
Sure.
Okay, so the next presenter is Céline.
Yes.
Céline, you were there. Okay, please go ahead. You are from University of La Réunion,
Yes.
Indian immigrants in the French Reunion Island.
I have recorded that presentation, but could you put the presentation, or should I share my screen?
Yeah, I think you can share your screen.
Okay,
Pari, can you help, please?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Can you see the?
Yes, it says that it's starting. Yes.
Can you
Okay,
see
we
it?
can see now. Yes, we can see. If you can just go on full screen, please.
Yes. Can I start?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So-
Please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Please, first of all, I'd like to thank a lot all the members of the organization, and above all to Farzana Gounder for her great work for the coordination of this wonderful meeting and symposium. And I'd like to thank also Naren, Prasad, and Seethanen, excuse me, for the first presentation. I remember that Naren Prasad had give some information about Réunion Island from a geographical point of view, and for having given a figure of the population of Indian origin here in Réunion Island. So thank you very much, Naren. However, I would like to give, before starting, a few small clarification about what it was said in the first presentation. The first thing is that a lot of research exists concerning indenture in Réunion, but they are published in English. That's why they are not very new among the researchers. Second thing, I am quite surprised and very. I'd like to speak about that by Naren Prasad title, because his title was "What Happened in Réunion Island," and I want to say that nothing special happened in Réunion Island. It's just the fact that the indenture movement came in a lot of English territory, English colony, and only in a small, a few colony in French. So this is an explication to the few information that it can be found about indenture in Réunion. So it is because indenture labor has affected more British colony than French colony. What is very interesting to understand is that the Indian people, as I am going to show in my presentation, Indian people did not arrive from the indenture period in Réunion Island, because Réunion is very close to India. But they arrive as early as the period of the settlement of Réunion with the first owner in Réunion. And from the 18th century, we can find some Indian, and in all the strata of the society, they were slave, free worker, but also land owner owning slaves, for example. Third thing, regarding the religion of the Indian, my PhD is devoted and especially on this subject. And I explained that there are several factors that explain the religious situation of the Indian in Réunion. And what is important to look is the social situation of the indenture from their territory. And from this, we can better understand their position in relation to the host society. I will start my presentation now. The general context. As you can see, as I said a few minutes ago, since the 17th century, the East India Company has been engaged in trade in the Indian Ocean, and the settlement of Réunion Island begins with a survived population brought from several regions. And in 18th century, these slaves were taken from the French counter in Pondicherry, but as well as freemen, skilled workers, and a few came from North India also, from Bengal. After the slave revolution in Haiti and the loss of Santo Domingo, the planters of Réunion Island decided to abandon the culture of coffee to focus on sugarcane. And since slavery was banned by the Congress of Vienna in 1815, they turned to their French counter to recruit workers in the first time. This movement accelerated after the abolition of slavery in 1848, and I will try to show how these people from India continues their cult of their village when they arrive in Réunion. And what is important to remind, if when they come in the 19th century, there is already people from Indian origin in Réunion Island. They are not alone. The Indenture are not alone when they come. There is already cultural events in the island. At this time, the Indian who settled in the islands in the 18th century were already really partly Catholic because of the French colonization and the French territory in India, Pondicherry, but they also celebrated the great feast of the Tamil country, as well as the Muharram, popular Muslim ceremony south of India. And when the immigration increased in the middle of 19th century, it's at this period that most came from French counter in India. Yanaon, Trichinopoly, Karikal, Madras, Pondicherry, and Mahé. When quota were insufficient at this moment, recruiters turned into the English territory, including Bengal. Hence, a minority of this indenture came from North India, and the documentation said that the latter were considered more fragile, got sick more often, and were less resistant to this tropical climate in Réunion Island. What about the social origin of the indenture? We therefore have a majority of Indians coming from southern India. Mostly were Hindu, but among them we could find a minority who were Muslim and Catholic. Some scholars in India specify that in the middle of the 19th century, in Pondicherry, only the outcasts agreed to work among European settlers because the higher class considered that it was impure to work among white people. So it was easier for this recruiter to turn to the lower caste. And they were also more, these lower castes were more likely to leave their country because of the discrimination by the other caste, by the superior caste. On this picture, you can see a camp where indenture could come. It is in Beaufort, Saint-Benoît, in the east of the island. I don't know if you can see it in a good way. I will try to put it diaporama à partir du début. Okay. Oh, sorry. So I said that this is a camp from Saint-Benoît in Réunion Island, in the east of the island. Réunion being a French colony, the official religion there was Catholicism. However, from the middle of the 19th century to the beginning of 20th century, the Church of France had to face the process of secularization of French society, which led to the law of separation of the church and the state. And in 1905, the church was separated completely from the state, which acknowledged no worship. From that date, the church in France lost its prestige. And however, in the colonies, the situation was a little different. The population as a whole remained very pious because of the slavery period. And an ideology emphasized the fact that being French was also being Catholic during a short period, which influenced those who wished to stay and integrate. During the last half of the 19th century, even if Catholicism was official, there were not enough priests to take care of the multitude of indentured people. So they were free to practice their cult, and Hinduism was firmly anchored in Réunion Island. For the honor, allowing these Indians to continue their rites, beat drum and make procession was also a way to attaching them to the Réunion Island. So what is important to know is that the procession were very famous in the cultural practice of people of Réunion, and this procession had always be very famous in the island. At the end of the 19th century, many of the second generation indenture asked to be baptized, either because they had married to a Creole Catholic or because of a concern for social integration. What is important to know is there was a lot of mixed marriage because of the imbalance between women in indenture and men in indenture, like in the other colonies. So as there were a few women, all the indenture had to marry with Creole people. And since the Tamil of lower caste were very familiar with Catholic and Protestant missionary from the territory in India, it is natural for them to respect all forms of the religion and to welcome Catholicism as another form of deity. As I said, since the 18th century, Indian popular cult have occupied a large place in the socio-cultural landscape of Réunion. Their ceremony have always attracted the rest of the population who attend them very widely. So transporting from their village of the south, the indenture celebrated the Pongal, organized a march on fire with sacrifices of animals like rooster, goat, cocks, and they prayed deity village, guardian of village, hero like Madurai Viren, Kalupu Swami, goddess protecting disease as Mariemen for disease. And quite a few northern cults survived also, such as the cock sacrifice for Durga and her seven sisters. The image that, the picture that we can see at the screen is from another researcher whose name Marie-Pierre Marina Radia in Réunion Island, who is now made a PhD at this moment. And we can show the praying rock that indenture used to pray just near the border of the sea. So during the 19th century, what is very interesting to know is that all the camps worship the Muslim patron Saint Nagura Mira Sahib, whose dargah is in the city of Nagaur. Nagura Villa was a very popular cult, and what is very sad to see is that now we can find the cult of Nagura Mira only in the rural temple and not in the important temple in the city. Among the family rites, offerings were made to the children protecting goddess, and until 1880, there was some ceremony related to marriage were still held in family. What we can say as conclusion is that from 1870, as in Mauritius, Malaysia, and South India, indenture and their descendants built temple in walls, on sugar house, on sugar plantation, and in private house. So I heard Naren Prasad saying that they were not allowed to build temple, and I not agree with that point of view, because since 1870 they were allowed, and all the big temple in the main city were built at this period. And there was some petition and some documentation about this period, and we can know that they could be together to ask for the build of the temple. So they entered the land, went to church, yes, and continued the cult brought by their ancestors. Sorry, indenture in Réunion have sometimes encountered particular reaction of hostility because of the strong influence of Catholicism in the European colony, but also on the other hand, because of the concept of French colonization, who is rightly favorable to the culture assimilation. So since the workers in the south of India were familiar with the French culture from the counters of Pondicherry, Karikal, Mahé, it can be said that they managed to adapt to the colonization and the world of the plantation. They relied on the freedom of religious expression based on secularity to keep the popular cult brought by their ancestors alive, engage into a process of creolization of the society. They succeeded in making Hinduism a cultural treasure for their host country, and this adaptation was also achieved thanks to their great religious fervor and the solidarity that bound among them. Away from India, unlike their counterpart in Mauritius, they have often appealed to India to maintain certain Tamil rites and reinvent a new identity in this Creole society. What we can say to finish is it's that in as the other colony, indenture labor was a very difficult period for the indenture labor because of abuse of contracts and working conditions. But the imbalance between men and women in the camps was also a fact. But on the other hand, it was also a great opportunity for the Indians who were able to buy land, open small business, and this only a few years after the abolition of slavery. That's why at the 21st century, a part of this population had a very good situation in Réunion Island. I thank you very much, all the people are listening to me, and the member of the organization for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Céline. I could see many comments in the chat box. Thanking you for the pleasant presentation. I'm sure that there would be some questions, and that you probably would like to answer. I have two more people on the list, but I'm not sure whether they are there. Sanoba Haider. She's on the list of presenters, but I'm not sure whether she would be here. And Girjanand Singh, Arvind, are you around? Okay, not here. So, what we will do now is get into Q&A session. If there are any questions, we have 24 participants who are connected. You are free to ask your question. I think there is enough time for us. If you raise your hand, the host will allow you to speak. And of course, I will allow you to speak. Are there any questions? Yes, Naren, yes, great.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. Thank you very much for those inspiring presentations done by all our colleagues that presented shortly. I have a very small question to Jimmy, in fact, if you'll allow me. When he presented about the narrative of the book, before he even presented, he gave this classification of the ethnic fabric of the Mauritian society. He put like 51% Indo-Mauritians and then some 12% as Muslims. I just wanted to know what's the difference between Indo-Mauritians and the Muslims. Are they not Indo-Mauritians, or is it based on the religion that? Thank you very much, Jimmy, for that.
Yeah, Naren, you stole my question.
I answer? Is it okay?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes, so let me bring, yeah, you are right. And it's a very good observation. So in fact, in the constitution of Mauritius, you have what you call an annex. It's called a schedule, and it's used especially for elections. So the classification of the population is in 4 groups. It is named like this: Indo-Mauritians. This is the first group. The second group is general populations. In fact, this is what we call the Creoles. You have the whites in that and all that. Then you have Muslims, Chinese. You have 4 groups. Now, for the Muslims, you are right. We all know all the Muslims came from India. So they were part of indentured labor. But in the Mauritian context, and especially when the constitution was written, especially in the 1940s, 50s, in the wake of the Indo-Pakistani conflict, in the wake of the partition of India, so the Muslims here politically preferred to group them, to lobby as a group. So that's why in the population classification of a population, you will see Indo-Mauritian and then Muslims. The same thing happens for language here in Mauritius. So in that group coming from India, for example, within the Muslims, you will see in our schools, we teach Urdu. But then in the 1980s, among the Muslims, so the Urdu especially was from Pakistan, okay? But the same Muslims within that group, they lobbied for Arabic. This was in the context of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi having an embassy in Mauritius and all that. So this is the particularity of the Mauritian context.
Okay. I think you have explained, but only partially. There may be many other dimensions to it. By the way, Urdu is an Indic language. It has its roots in United Provinces. And in the Pakistan, actually, or Pakistanis, particularly Punjabis, wanted to own it. In fact, if you go back, and there's a lot of argument and discussions, debate happening in India now about how the Pakistani military, of course, having its real roots in Punjab, wanted to impose Urdu in Bangladesh. That was terrible. And of course, many things have been said, and the history is out there. But I won't dwell on it. I'll leave it there. Naren, if you would want to add anything more.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jimmy, for your response. I get you in a sense that it's a more of a political grouping than anything else. That's what I gather. So yeah, I mean, if it's political, I mean, we can't debate too much whether exactly who fits in which case, like Legris. So yeah, I get your point, and I have had discussions about that particular issue with my Mauritian friends, and they give me the same answer. So yeah, I just wanted to a little bit, tease you on that topic. So well done. Just a few precisions here, Chair, if you'll allow me. I fully endorse and agree to what our colleague Céline Ramasamy was talking about reunion. Don't take me wrong in a sense that indeed, when I said that reunion is under-researched compared to the British colonies such as Fiji and Mauritius and others, if there is research done, which you rightly point out, it has been in French, and it was not coming to the Anglo-Saxon international world. I do speak French. I've looked into a lot of research that were published, and recently yourself and Regis Ramasamy and Prosper Eve and Mari Mutume, others, some of the recent scholars have started working on reunion to bring that particular issue about les engagés to the international world, right? So it's like opening, that was my point. I was not denying that there was no research done, but bringing those research to the international community in the international world. So that I fully agree with you that indeed, so that was my precision. About the religious practices, what I have been, discovering through my visits to the Reunion Island, through the field work that I've been doing with Sachi and others, is it's just getting the information. I'm sure history has been written by the victors most of the time, and they have given their interpretations of how things were. It was great, everything we look. It's only we start to discover how things were really in the countries by the local scholars like yourself. And I just take that example from my country, Fiji, is where we really started to discover what the indenture system was, not only by hearing from our grandparents and parents, and but then some of the scholars, the local scholars, like our colleague and friend Dr. Brij Lal, Chalo Jahaji Bhai, The Broken Waves, the books that was written. Then he really started to bring out what had happened, and recently Farzana Gounder has been walking in those footsteps and bringing about the violence that was perpetuated in those plantations, especially for the women. So all those things, I fully agree. We have a different history, different part of things written by the older generations, but now we rediscover things are not that, as clear crystal as we were made to believe. I mean, that was my point, is about the religious practices. Indeed, there were temples built and all those things. I agree, but they were, many people, for example, the Mauritians who had come to the Reunion Island were exiled back because they were practicing that language, as bringing the Indians together. And I have family members in the Reunion Island whose families were exiled back to the Mauritius Island. So it's through my own assessment, stories, and with Sachi's contribution that we are trying to bring that issue. So indeed, I fully agree with you, Céline. I hope we'll have the chance to, as I said, bring this reunion indenture system to this great panel or international organization, as Dr. Dinesh wants to talk about, is to bring reunion into this family with good stories like yourself and others and Regis are working on. So that was my point. So I hope I'm clear on that. Thank you very much, Céline. Okay.
Can I say a few?
Yeah, Céline, you can respond, and then after you, we could have Sinoba. I think she is here now, but it's written she has left again. I'm not sure. Anyway, you can respond. Yes.
Thank you. Just to say, Naren, that I understand very much what you said. So I am agree. What is important to understand is that the first generation of researchers were not really enough connected with the global research among indenture, but from now, from this period, the second generation of researchers who could be more connected, and I think that now it will be easier for us, to share this research You have in Réunion Island another lady who is working about indenture women in Réunion Island during the indenture, whose name is Sheila Narayana, and she's doing her PhD at this period, so she speaks English very well, and I think that she would be able to share her field with the other. And I think that now that we are connected together between Sachi, you, and Fiji and the other, I think that it would be able for us to share all the documentation and to send regularly articles and PowerPoint and I don't know, working together, it would be easier. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Céline. Okay, we'll move on. Are there any more questions? Please go ahead if you have any pressing questions. We would not want to close the session now so early. We have a bit of time. Jimmy, would you want to respond to Naren's narration? What he had to say, or
no, it's okay. It's okay. And you know, in fact, that question about classification, it's linked to the best loser system also. So for this, you remember I was explaining that in our electoral system. So at the National Assembly, you have 60 seats. 60, yes, I think 60. And then you have 62 plus, I think, 8. You have what we call the reserve seats. You have all those who have been elected, what we call cross, just at one go. Okay? So one man, one vote. But then to ensure the equilibrium at national level in the National Assembly, you have what we call these best loser seats. And these best loser seats are allocated on the official classification of the population. That is in terms of Indo-Mauritian, especially for minorities, Muslims, and general population. So just to come to add on the explanation I was giving to Prasad. Okay. So it's a very interesting area for researchers, but it's quite complex. And there have been a lot of research on the Constitution of Mauritius about representation of democracy. And the case of Mauritius is interesting. I know there have been comparative studies with Israel and Mauritius, for example, on that aspect of representation in the National Assembly. Yeah. And so this boils down to a relationship between people, between we Mauritians as well, you know. So this is what makes things complex, subtle, and things are not black and white. You have blurred frontiers, That's why my presentation ended with a reflection on the self. You have the identity self, the social identity self, but then you have your own personal self.
Yeah, Jimmy, just to add to it, what would you be able to say about the race relations in Mauritius right now?
Yeah, so it's I suppose like in all societies, you have the code and encoding and decoding in the relationship with people. So we in the Mauritian, there have been a recent studies with I think the University of Stanford on race relation in Mauritius. We Mauritians, we don't say things bluntly. Okay, it's very subtle. In fact, we have inherited both the British and the French culture. I would say, sorry, I said that for Céline. Maybe I would say the French is direct. The British is, diplomatic, is a way of saying things. So in terms of race relations, we do have issues of race in Mauritius, As a researcher, I cannot say no, but in the day-to-day life, we manage to transit. There is transition, there is transformation, there is negotiation of identities.
Right, thank you. Are there any more questions?
Chair, can I just add something if you'll allow? It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Right. I just wanted to mention one more thing, but just by listening to what Jimmy was saying and putting into context what we were discussing in yesterday's session. I mean, we were asking about what we should be called, what our names, coolies or Malbar or whatever, we were talking about. I always say whenever I meet friends from, descendants of the indentured laborers, either it's Mauritians or Reunionians or from Trinidad, Suriname, we always say, as I mentioned in my session yesterday and today, is that we have the common heritage. We share the history, right? I always say that, you took the first boat to somewhere, or your ancestors, ours were the second boat, but coming from the same place, right? Taking the second boat. So we are all connected, so that's something that I want to mention and emphasize. If we can capitalize on this network where we bring this common heritage, common history, similarities, of course there are differences if you want to talk about that. But the question is bringing this into the forefront and talk about it as a family. It reminds me of what T.S. Eliot. I'm sure Jimmy would know his poetries and poems that he wrote, where once he mentioned brilliantly about the British and who were fighting in Africa. And the Indians were together fighting for some lost causes, where he said, a man's destination is not his destiny. Every country is home to one man and exile to another, where a man dies bravely at one with his destiny, that soil is his, right? Wherever we are, we have a common heritage, right? That's what I wanted to mention. Let's talk about the connections that we have rather than the differences we have. And this is the great network we can work together. So thank you very much, Chair, for having me say those things. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Naren. You said something pretty heavy, huh? I think so. We'll call for some more questions. If not, then we will close the session. Is Sanoba Haider here? If she is, then we can have a presentation. I don't see it. We can just wait. Yeah, Rosanna, do you have any questions for the presenters? Okay. Or the other option is, Fazana, we can put her into the next session. Is it possible? All right. Yeah.
Sunil, I saw her and I'm just wondering if she had a connection problem. Of course, as soon as I sent her an email to say, we're waiting for you, she came on straight away and she was there and then she sort of fell off. So I'm wondering if we could just wait just a few minutes in case she's trying to get on.
Okay.
I know Amba also had problems, connectivity problems from India.
Okay. We'll give her 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there are people who might want to leave. Yeah.
Exactly. And Sunil, you did say, did I have a question? I do. And those of you who presented, Céline and Jimmy, really appreciated you joining and talking to us in English, because you know that we can't speak in French. Well, I certainly can't. And I really do appreciate that. And it's a great opportunity for us to connect and to do research together. And I'm hoping that this will lead us to do further research, further collaborations, and do comparative studies on Reunion, on Mauritius, on Fiji, and do some great work together.
Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. Any sign of Snowba?
So far, no.
Okay, so I think we can close the session.
Okay, and if she does ask, you know, we can say that we've moved her into the next session.
Yeah, we can put her on the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good evening to you all. Thanks so much for your hard work. Your presentations were brilliant. I'm sure this is going to add to the knowledge and the stock of knowledge that we have about the Girmitias, their tribulations everywhere in Fiji, Mauritius, every part of the world. And I'm sure there's a lot of space for more research. We are going to join together. I think in 2 years, the conference will come up again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And those participated, joined us in this session. Thank you so much for being with us. Vinaka Baglevo.